So I've just uploaded 5 projects to GitHub, and that includes 3 startup businesses and 2 personal projects. So with the startup businesses, my first one was called Math Test, which is just an iPhone app that I wrote, and my theory was I'll migrate it to Android if it's successful on iPhone, and it wasn't successful, so I didn't migrate it. But when I wrote it, I chose to write it in Objective-C and C++, which is a bit unusual. Most people just write in Objective-C, but the C++ can also be used on the Android, so it just made sense to just reuse code. But anything to do with the GUI interface was in Objective-C. It also used SQLite because that's the database stuff that you get in across every single mobile phone. So there's that one. And so my second startup, that was called Code Magged. So I spelt code with a K. Magged is like a German word for made, a traditional made. Most Germans don't use that type of word, but it looks cool when it's written down. Anyway, it's for Microsoft Excel. So I wrote a toolbar using C#, and this toolbar gave all the functionality that computer programmers like. So, because if you're using Visual Studio or if you're using Eclipse or any sort of other IDE like NetBeans or stuff like that, you get lots of functionality, which you do not have in Excel or Access or anything. So I created this toolbar for Excel, and it does everything you need as a computer programmer. You might need a few more things, but it does a lot for computer programmers. And so I used an add-in with that one, which was a license. So it's an external dependency. And so you could use it for free for 28 days. And then when that 28 days is up, you'd have to buy a license from me. But I stopped it completely years ago, so don't worry about that. But then I did my third startup, and that was an online shop. So I use software that's called OpenCart, and with OpenCart, it's like a ready-to-use online shop. But you need to run a lap stack, so it's like all your Apache and MySQL stuff. But the thing is, like when all the data is stored in MySQL, that's nice. But my supplier for goods would send me a text file every day. So I'd have to take that text file and put that data onto the MySQL tables. And that sounds simple, easy. But if you've got like a new type of hat, or if you've got new shoes like Nike or something, then not only do you have to list that new item, all your menus will be wrong because you won't have that particular brand because there'll be a new one, and then you have to update the tables that relate to the menus, and you also have to update the tables that relate to the filtering and these sorts of things. And so from such a simple thing, you actually find lots and lots of complications, and then you have to automatically write your robot.txt file and all sorts. And then one of the suppliers decided not to supply me, and I had to find another supplier and rewrite everything. And so, yeah, that was a lot of Java. I wrote it in Java. I knew Java from university, and at university we used Javac to compile it because, this is the second time I went to university, and I didn't finish the degree because experience was a lot more important than qualifications, because this was over 20 years ago now. 24 years ago, something like that. Yeah. So just get a bit of experience and I'll be fine. But so I didn't finish the degree, but I did do Java. I also did C++. But yeah, so I used Javac at university. And when you look at my Java that I did now, I use Javac as well. So I didn't use any IDE. I just used text editors, and that was fine. And so, you know, those are the three startup businesses. I also did two personal projects that I've loaded up. One is a computer game, so you've got a little character, walks around, does stuff. Um, and so the character is actually created using a tool called Make Human, which just created the skin. Now this project Make Human has progressed, and the people who do that have got quite a cool tool that adds clothing, adds a skeleton, and all of that. But when I used it years and years ago, it just provided the skin. So I then had to create a skeleton. And if you think about the bones, like in the forearm and the upper arm, you need to attach the skin to the bones. But on the elbow, when you bend the elbow, you don't want that skin doing weird things and going off in weird angles. So I wrote Python to actually smooth down those things. So in between one bone and another, it's smooth. It makes you bend your elbows and knees without weird things happening to that skin. Because a computer character is basically a cartoon strip. So you got all the frames, and when you're walking, you loop through, say, the first 20 frames, and you keep looping through the 20 frames for walking. Then someone presses a button to jump, and on the end, like somewhere else along this cartoon strip, a whole load of frames to do with jumping. So that you then loop through the jumping frames, then you can loop through the walking frames again. So in order to create that, I use a software called Blender that I use because you can use add-ins in Blender, which is all the Python script, and that enables all of that stuff to do with attaching the skin to the, like when you're looking at the knees or the elbows. So if you attach it to the middle of the forearm, it's only attached to one bone. Well, two bones in the forearm, but in the model you only have one bone, so it stays attached to that bone. So when you're animating it, that's easy. It's the joints that look a bit weird. And yeah, so, but the biggest issue that I had was creating a world, um, because you want the character to walk through rooms and that. But these three-dimensional rooms are just vertexes everywhere, and if you're like an arch on a door frame or whatever, it's just a lot of work to manually create that. So in Blender again, I created a really big Python script, and I think that's the Python script that is on GitHub. So because I wanted to have just a text file saying, here's a wall, it's got doors, windows, and just write text file saying that, and then run the script, and it creates three-dimensional worlds with walls, doors, and windows. So that worked, but in the end, I saw it'll probably take about 20 years to finish an entire game. So I got a job instead. I didn't finish that. And that was just a personal project. So I learned a bit of code on the way, because it was C++ for the game, which was only such a small amount. It's mostly the Python is what I was learning. But then the games engine I used is from Quake 2. I can't pronounce the name correctly. I think it's iLicked, which is the Quake 2 engine. It's free for anyone to use. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But yeah, yeah, pretty cool project to do. But the second personal project was a website to do like board games, like chess or drafts or whatever. So um, what it is I use well the PHP to create a website, which was just like more of like a test bit that is nothing notable. And then when you move on the canvas objects of that, then that triggers the JavaScript, which then connects with the Node.js, which updates the MySQL databases. But the cool thing I did, which is incredibly unusual for a website, is to write a C++ bot. So when you do a move in chess, you then want a bot to actually create the next move. So C++ is a nice, powerful language. So started writing that, and so it's all a very complicated thing. So I didn't finish it, but I took some of the C++, and I think that well, that's on GitHub, but the website was just very simple PHP and JavaScript, so nothing too impressive there. But so I didn't finish it, and my idea was to create it so it would work on any board game I wanted. So build a basic framework and then do the particular details to do with specific board games. So I use those, and but no, I realise a lot of programmers don't mind using a DLL or a library or whatever, and they can just bring everything in. But like, I am a VBA programmer, and if you're doing that, you don't get an installation file or package that you can just put your DLLs on someone's Windows machine and everything connects nice and it updates the registry. That doesn't happen because in VBA you either got Excel, Access, Word, whatever. It's a file. Everyone's computer is different, and if you have all these add-ins and DLLs, it's such a nightmare. It will just go wrong, and you've got to work on hundreds of machines. I don't use external dependencies unless I absolutely have to. So that'll be a bit of a difference you'll see in my code. And with naming conventions, like virtually every VBA bit of code I've ever seen that someone else has written doesn't use naming conventions. And they just write the letter X or whatever. And I obey coding standards, and my code is very reliable. Strange that. It's you do things correctly and it works. But when you see my naming conventions, I think C++ people like to do things that like have particular prefixes on whatever and that. But I'm used to the naming conventions I use in VBA. So if you're thinking, well, that's not a C++ way to name something, then well, yeah, I'm a VBA programmer, so I mean it's not that difficult to switch over. But that's that. So yeah, those are my 5 projects that I've just uploaded onto GitHub, and enjoy.